Hey class, we are going to review properties of quadratics because that's what we talked about before spring break, and we really need to know that vocabulary going forward. So I just wrote down an example, and you can pause the video and copy it if you would like to make some notes for yourself. But we're just going to go through. So remember, a quadratic function creates this U shape, which is called a parabola. Okay, that's just the U shape. And it could also be upside down. It could look like this. So sometimes it's a U, sometimes it's an N, however you want to think about it. But it's created because our equation has an x squared. So our equation usually looks like something like this. And it always has this piece, even if that piece looks like x minus 4 squared, it still has that square in it, okay? And then remember, there were different pieces of this quadratic. So the middle point, which is right here, and if I were to label it, it would be -2, -3. This is called the vertex. And this particular vertex is at the bottom, which means it's a minimum. Okay, so vertex is your middle point, and it's either a minimum or it could be at the top like this, and then it would be a maximum. And we'll look at an example like that. And then we have the zeros, which is where it crosses the x-axis. So my zeros are 0, 0, and -1, 2, 3, 4, 0. And remember, zeros can also be called x-intercepts or roots. And then sometimes we have a y-intercept, and in this case my y-intercept was one of my zeros because it's where it crosses the y-axis. And then the last thing that we talked about was the axis of symmetry. And the axis of symmetry cuts your graph in half. So this right here is my axis of symmetry. And the equation is x equals, and it's the x value of your vertex, so x equals -2, okay? So those are kind of all the pieces that we talked about before we left on break. Now, I want to show you something else. So if I have, I'm going to make up an equation here for example 2. So if I say f of x equals, and let's say f of x equals negative x squared minus 4. Okay, negative x squared minus 4. And I want you to list the different pieces. Actually, let's do this. Let's do f of x equals negative x minus 2 squared minus 4. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so now how to use a graphing calculator when you don't have a graphing calculator. So I'm going to show you where you should go in Google Classroom. So if you go to your Google Classroom and you click on classwork, I created a topic called calculator, and here's a graphing calculator. And if you click on that, it says Desmos. And so it's going to take you to here, and here is a really cool graphing calculator, and you can type in the equation. So I'm going to type in f of x equals negative x minus 2, and look, it's graphing it for you as we type. And then to get squared, if you click on this little keypad here, you can click the squared button, and then let's change it to plus 4. Okay, so I changed my equation to plus 4. So now it graphs it for me, and it even tells you what the order pairs are for these points. Okay, so those are the points that we are really concerned about. And so we can see that the zeros, or again the x-intercept or the root, okay, there's two of them. We have 0, 0, and we have 4, 0. And the next thing that we have here is the vertex, right? That's our middle point. And so our vertex is 2, 4, and it's at the top of my graph this time, so that means it's a maximum. And then the last thing that I want to point out is the axis of symmetry. And the axis of symmetry always goes through the x-axis, and it always goes through the vertex. And so the x value of my vertex is 2. And if I wanted to check to make sure I have the right equation, if I just click in this next box, I can add a new equation. And if I type in x equals 2 and just press enter, it graphs it as a blue line for me, and I can see that it actually does go through the vertex. So my axis of symmetry is x equal 2. Okay, so I've been writing all of this information down as I've been talking, so if you need to pause your video and write it down, you can. So now that we've talked about all of the different pieces and I've shown you where to go to use a calculator, the next thing is that you are going to go back to Google Classroom and you're going to click on this Part 2 Nearpod assignment. And when you click on it, you're going to be asked to put in your name. And then this is the first slide that you see. So it's just a reminder that you needed to watch this Edpuzzle video so that you can know how to use the calculator. And then you're going to go through this Nearpod. And there are 2 sets of matching, and then a quiz question and a poll at the end. So just a reminder to read all of the instructions at the top. So when you go through it, here's one of the matching activities. Match each term with its definition. You should only have 7 matches. So if you're sitting there trying to guess through it, I'm going to know, and you're going to lose points for every match over 7. The next thing is matching, but you're going to want to use the Desmos calculator so that you can see what the graphs look like. So it's going to, says key features. At vertex at -4, 1, so you need to look and see which graph it is, and if you don't see a graph that matches, then it's going to be possibly one of the equations. Again, you should have 8 matches, so take your time, use your calculator to make sure you know which one goes with which, because if you have more than 8 matches, you're going to lose points. And then you get to a question. Examine the equation and graph given. So here's the equation, here's the graph. If you can't see that graph, then you can click on it. It will make it a little bit bigger, but you can go back and click or type this equation into Desmos. And then there's just a poll at the end so that I can see how you feel about quadratic functions so far. and then there's my information. So if you have questions, you can email me or you can send me a remind message. And then during office hours, I can set up a Zoom meeting so you can get on and we can actually talk face to face and answer any questions that you have. Okay? Alrighty, well hopefully that all makes sense. This is your first assignment.